Now we have Pila Pharma here on the stage and CEO Gustav Hanghøj Gram. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be back in Stockholm, see some old familiar faces and some new faces here in the audience. It's great to be here at the Aktiedagarna. So for those of us who don't know us, and I will try to speak in a relatively clear English. I am Danish, so my Swedish is maybe not as good as it needs to be for a CEO role, but I'm improving, and until then, I will conduct this in English. So we are a small biotech company based in Malmö, in southern Sweden, and we are developing a new type of medication for treatment of metabolic diseases, primarily such as type 2 diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, but equally so also for painful diseases. So exciting areas of very high value. I think everyone knows this by now. And of course, I hope that today I can give you a little bit of insight on how we judge the market for these types of diseases, but equally so how we fit in. And hopefully it's of interest to you. So a little bit about us, just as a background. We were founded in 2014 by Mrs. Stora Gram. She is an ex-scientist from Novo Nordisk, where she has worked in the obesity labs, and she was one of the clinical researchers who was on the project that discovered the molecule that is now semaglutide, which is, of course, the active ingredient in Ozempic and Wegovy, which is this fantastic new class of weight-regulating drugs. She founded the company in 2014, as I said, so we just had our 10-year birthday, which is great. We've made it this far, and we intend to continue for many more years. We were listed on NASDAQ First North in 2021 at in hindsight, very terrible time to go on the stock exchange with rising interest rates and everything since. So it has been a bit of a pain ever since, but we believe in ourselves, and we believe we have a project that is worthwhile to pursue. And equally so, we also have a great investor base that have supported us throughout. We have a molecule that is a TRPV1 antagonist that we first in-licensed in 2016 and have subsequently bought out. So we fully own this molecule. This is called XEND-0501, which is a TRPV1 antagonist. Now, it's important to emphasize that TRPV1 antagonists have traditionally been associated with pain diseases. Now, this is a target that is found on all sensory afferent nerves in the body. So this is a nerve kind of stimulating receptor. It is very much associated with the sensation of pain and heat. We believe, and this is again a discovery that Ms. Stora Gram, she found when she was working on her PhD thesis with Novo Nordisk, that it might actually play a role in terms of regulating metabolic diseases and underlying inflammation that you have in those. We have conducted 2 clinical trials in type 2 diabetes ourselves, which have been safety trials in order to determine that this type of molecule was safe in type 2 diabetics. And we have also obtained what is called an orphan drug designation in the US for painful rare disease. So pain is, of course, equally so a huge market, and it is something that we're looking to pursue increasingly going forward in terms of trying to exploit the value of the molecule that we own. A little bit more about the molecule itself. It has a very good stability, and it is currently in these 4 milligram tablets, so they're very small and easy to scale, easy to produce, easy to distribute, something which cannot be said for current generation medicines for particularly weight loss. I mean, everyone knows that these novel generations of particularly GLP-1 analogs, they have to be refrigerated and stored under special conditions. And this is, of course, something that adds up in the long run for consumers in terms of price. So we believe we have a good profile on the formulation side. This molecule in particular was developed by Bayer originally, so it comes from a big pharma company in the sense, and it has been in 8 clinical trials before we took it over. So it has already been in 300 human patients, which gives us quite a good knowledge and understanding of the safety of this molecule. Of course, it also means that the molecule is a little bit old, but we feel that it is worthwhile pursuing, and then of course we have to file new patents on each individual indication going forward. So this is our pipeline for now. We have the blue track, which is diabetes, obesity, and heart failure. I'll get back to that in a second. We have our orphan or the rare disease track in orange in the middle, which is erythromelalgia. This is a small but painful rare disease, which is something that we would really much like to pursue. There's some really good incentives for getting on the market. In rare diseases, you get 7 years of market exclusivity in the US, for example. So we are looking to potentially drive this forward, sidelining with the diabetes indication in order to get on the market a bit earlier and make some of the development costs back in revenue. We also have a small cardiovascular program running here in Stockholm, or north of Stockholm in Uppsala, with the research group there. And this is for, we want to understand whether our molecule can actively help reduce the risk of developing what's called an aorta aneurysm. So it's when the aorta kind of swells up to the point where it can risk bursting, and at which point you will bleed to death. So this is not a very good disease to go around with. And unfortunately, this is something that implicates about 1% of all men globally above the age of 65 every year. So this is, we usually say that, you know, diabetes leads to a lot of comorbidities, a lot of cardiovascular disease. Diabetes is not what kills you, it's the comorbidities. And aorta aneurysm is one of them. So this is ongoing right now, and this is something that we hope to get results from quite soon. So I hope to be able to tell you more about this next time I'm here. But a little bit about like the whole metabolic syndrome, or cardiometabolic syndrome as we call it now. I think it's been very much defined now that obesity is the driver behind all of, you know, the associated risk factors that we see nowadays in metabolic diseases. So with obesity, you're going to have a heightened level of inflammation in the body, which leads to liver disease, which leads to type 2 diabetes, which leads to atherosclerosis. And equally so, each of these individual components may lead to one or the other as well. So once you get trapped into this cycle, it's very, very difficult to break out of it. It seems as if, and also looking at some of the newer studies on the GLP-1 analogs, it seems that if you can reduce the weight of a patient, you can effectively eliminate most of these diseases. So obesity is the key. And we believe that our molecule could potentially play a role in treating obesity as well. And just to showcase again that, you know, this is a global phenomenon that is especially ongoing in the Western part of the world, and it is going to continue. 25% of the world is, of course, a huge amount of people. And if they will be overweight or obese, we're going to have a staggering amount of health-related costs to societies. So this is, of course, something that is both in the interest of regular taxpayers, but authorities and governments to look into. And again, we believe that having a scalable solution that could be available to masses would be in the interest of the public. Market sizes are large, to put it mildly. We're talking plus $100 billion each. And I think it's important to emphasize that these diseases, as you saw on the previous slide before, they often have a very large overlap. So it's very difficult to put into words exactly how much cardiovascular disease is worth or how much diabetes is worth, because you often have associated costs to these. But that being said, of course, it's huge markets, and if you can even get a very tiny fraction of this, this is going to be very attractive. The market is currently dominated by 2 large players, but what we see from our point of view in our small company is that the market is fragmenting now towards new modalities, basically. So we've cracked the code with GLP-1s. We've showcased that we can actually lower the body weight to a level where it is disease modifying. But it also comes with the implications that a lot of patients cannot tolerate these drugs on for a very long time, or alternatively, that they cannot afford them for a very long time. So what we see now is that you have a huge amount of like these global players, which I think is fair to say, with the likes of Sanofi and Novartis and AstraZeneca here from Sweden. They're all announcing their intention to move into to this space. And of course, you subsequently also have a lot of smaller companies like ourselves here in Pila, who are developing different kinds of new modalities, new drugs, targeting new receptors. And of course, this is hugely exciting for us because we can see that this market is going in a direction where you're looking past just GLP-1s. You're looking at how you can shape future treatment by having different types of side effect profiles. And in order to have different side effect profiles, it makes very much sense to combine. So you see an increase in novel products that come through the clinic now, which are combined with different mechanisms of action. So we think it's interesting, and we think, in theory, with a small molecule asset like ours, if we can showcase that it is safe and it is efficacious on regulating body weight and potentially on cardiovascular disease, we feel it should be of interest to these big guys, and it is also what we hear when we talk to them. So why do we believe we could showcase anything on body weight? Well, again, this particular receptor has never really, in the science, been associated with metabolic diseases. So we have a lot of work to do in the sense of trying to educate the scientific community around our thoughts and our thinking. This is a slide that showcases a rat study conducted by Ms. Stora Gram with a TRPV1 antagonist, so exactly the same target as ours, that is extremely similar in its chemical profile to ours. So we have a good feeling that if we can showcase something, it could look something like this. This model in particular is a rat model where you're looking to assess whether these obese rats, if they take on less weight than placebo. So it sounds a bit weird to start, but in reality it translates in human models to body weight loss. So in this model you see that these rats actually take on half of what the placebo rats are doing, more or less. And of course this could, at least in theory, lead to a substantial weight loss in humans as well. And this is something that we want to assess. I mean, we can see that this is the direction of interest from both pharma and from investors as well, like, can you regulate body weight? So this is something that we want to assess in our next trial. Our next trial will be a phase 2A dose escalation trial where we will see how high we can go in dose levels with our molecule. And in this, we have included enough patients to have an assessment on regulation of body weight. So this is, of course, very interesting. We have some data from our previous diabetes trials just to showcase that there is trends for improvement. This is for insulin secretion in particular. And we also have a trend for reduction in HbA1c, which is long-term blood glucose, of course. However, these tests were only based on 4-week treatment periods, which is not long enough to have a definitive say as to whether they could have a more long-term effect that would be what is required within at least diabetes treatment. We did, however, have a very big reduction in a biomarker for a cardiovascular disease called ANP, or it's a biomarker called ANP that is a biomarker that indicates the stress level on the heart. So it is indicative, as we understand it from cardiologists, on the risk of developing heart failure. And heart failure, again, is of course one of these cardiovascular diseases that can really debilitate patients and end up killing them in the long run. So, as I would say, this is actually the best data that we have currently. This is what we would consider as proof of concept. However, we are very positive to assess whether, of course, this could be increased even further once we up the dose and we go on longer duration. A little bit about pain. So this is the original target for TRPV1. This is, of course, something that everyone can understand on a global level. Everyone has tried to be in pain at some point in their life. And this is also a very, very big market. We're talking $85 billion with a 4 to 5% annual growth from the data that we have been able to find. And we, as far as we can tell, we have a molecule that in the right formulation and with the right safety data could potentially be of interest to societies in terms of developing new pain treatments that are non-addictive. I mean, we all know that there's big issues with opioids, especially in the United States, but increasingly so here in Europe and in my own native Denmark. It's very much a topic right now. So we feel like it's a good time to start addressing whether we could acid explore a bit further and see if we could potentially set some new pilot trials in motion to assess whether our molecule, as for a start, whether it alleviates patients of pain. If they are alleviated of pain, okay, good, then we can progress to longer trials. I took some slides just to showcase a bit of the market. Again, it corresponds more or less to what we've been thinking as well. Opioids is the biggest drug class with about 28 billion in annual cost to societies on a global scale. Indication-wise, it's mostly on post-operational pains. So when people have had fractures or had surgeries, they have pain and they are induced with opioids, which can of course be costly in the end. Erythromelalgia is a disease that we have an orphan drug designation for in the US, so this is the painful rare disease This is a much smaller market, is $3.65 billion in 10 years from now. So not huge by any means, but it's still sufficiently huge for a small company like ours to want to pursue. Now, there's no current treatments for this particular disease, and there's no number of patients defined. So it is a little bit difficult for us to estimate how much development costs would be. But we have made a development plan for this disease, and we're assessing now how to kickstart and get this moving. And we think this could be of huge interest to investors as well in order to see us as a company start making money, because the diabetes and obesity trial is, of course, very lengthy and costly. We've done well so far this year among biotech and healthcare. On First North, we're still #1. I think the stock is very volatile, so it's going up and down a little bit sometimes. But of course, it's indicative that we are in a space where there's a lot of interest. We've had significant interest from Danish investors this year. They of course have a lot of information around the value of modern-day obesity medication. So we try to exploit that a lot, and we were one of the most traded companies on the Danish Nordnet site in the summer as well, among some very big companies. So this is what it looks like for now. We started the year pretty low, but we're moving forward pretty well. And I think, in my own words, I like to say that it's going in the right direction. And I hope that investors would think so too. And just relative to peers, this is in the obesity space, we actually performed very well in the last 6 months since I took over as CEO. Growth in shareholders is good, moving upwards. It comes and goes a bit in waves, but we of course hope that any of you who find an interest would look more into us. We have a good board of directors. We have Dorte, who's the founder, of course, and chief science officer. We have Richard, who's our financials expert. And then we have Julie and Lasse, who are experts in basically getting drugs to market. They have both been with Big Pharma, working specifically on getting drugs to market and doing market access analysis. So they're extremely helpful in getting us to understand how we could potentially get this to work. World-class science board, we have Jens Juul Holst, of course, who is the second from the left. He is the founder, or he's the guy that discovered the GLP-1. And he is basically what in science, in the science field, we call him the modern-day father of obesity medicine. There's basically no one bigger than him. And of course, we have Mark Evans, who's in the middle. He's our scientific expert from the UK, and the next clinical trial which we will run will be at his site in Cambridge. So we look forward to work with him. We have a small C team with myself, Elna, and Dorte as the science officer, and she's of course, putting everything in motion to try and deliver results. So just to summarize, why invest in us? I mean, we have a good stock, which is highly liquid, which is great to see. Of course, hugely valuable therapeutic areas that we deal with, which is, of course, always of interest. Unique molecular function. There's no one else doing GLP-1 antagonists, to our knowledge, in metabolic diseases, so this is, of course, great. And as I said a little bit earlier, we see the market is fragmenting a lot going forward. So companies will be increasingly looking to diversify and check and try out new mechanisms. And there's still a lot of the big players in the market that are not with something great in their pipelines. So there should be an appetite for acquisitions in the coming years, I would guess. Small molecules, it's attractive to pharma in the sense that it can both be made as a standalone, it can be scaled, it can be distributed, but it can also be combined with other molecules fairly easily. So our intention is to build a smaller pipeline in metabolic and in pain. This is, of course, based on the receptor that we work with. But as with anything in biotech, this is high risk. There's no guarantees, but equally so, there's a higher chance of reward if we succeed. So that's all from me for now. Sorry for going a little bit over time, but I hope there's still time for a few questions at least.
No problem. Thank you very much, Gustav. I shoot off with one question regarding your research program. I mean, taking a phase 2 and 2B study, you need to raise money for that, I guess.
So the phase 2A, we already raised capital for.
Yeah.
Yes. So, but of course, the phase 2A is dependent on more funding being raised, and that's where we also see an opportunity now. If we, let's say, commence some smaller trials like this cardiovascular trial or potentially a smaller pain trial, if those are successful, we could potentially be able to land a partnership agreement early on for those indications, which could, again, potentially get some kind of kickback in the sense of an upfront payment that could be funneled into more indications.
Yeah, and lower the risk, right?
Yeah, but I mean, we as a company, we're flexible in the sense that we feel like we are in a good spot right now. We feel like we have a good momentum. We feel like there's a good amount of interest among both Danish and Swedish investors, but equally so international investors are starting to know about us. And of course, the market is a bit tricky sometimes to raise capital in, especially now in the winter here in Stockholm. It gets increasingly cold. But that being said, we're very opportunistic. In the summer, we conducted a directed issue to existing and new investors to get things moving. And I mean, we're always ready to strike again if the opportunity arises.
Yeah. When it comes to the study, the two how do you actually measure efficiency in your research?
So, of course, I mean, this is a fairly small study. It will only be about 40 patients. So, aside from the safety, we will of course do body measurements at start and finish. So, we will likely do DEXA scans to basically have some kind of base scenario of where they were when they started the treatment and how they are when they finish the treatment. And that will also give us a lot of information as to what kind of weight loss this could be. I mean, is it weight loss of just muscle mass or fat mass, or is it one or the other? I mean, of course, you would like to have more fat mass and muscle mass being lost. So this is, of course, something that we pursue as one of the very important things in the next coming trial. So it's relatively simple, I would say, in the sense of assessing efficacy just on body weight regulation.
Yeah,
it's just going on a scale, right?
Yes, of course, but it's of course difficult how people live and so on.
I mean, some things we can control. That's for sure. But we anticipate that if we, I mean, this is a 3-month trial, so of course, depending on the dose levels that each individual person will end up on, we intend to see differences.
Yeah, very interesting. And what about shareholding? I mean, you have not been CEO for a very long time. Have you bought any shares?
I've bought a lot of shares. I've seen my chance to increase my positions a couple of times, and I mean, as much as this share is fluctuating, I also feel like there's sometimes opportunities coming and going. So I've bought shares myself 3 times this year, and it needs to be said, of course, that the founder is also a relative of mine. So I mean, she's still holding 20% of the company as a whole. So many people would argue that maybe I don't need to buy that many shares, but I feel like it's an obligation from my side as well to show that I am committed on a personal level. Yeah. And as a small company, we don't have any options program or anything for now. So I feel like it's important for me to show that I'm willing to spend my own wages on buying shares in the company as well.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Gustav.
Thank you.
We need to move on.
Yes, of course. Thank you.